I don't know if you guys do any resolutions, but I'm at the place where my kids are old enough that sometimes they make the suggestions to my resolutions. And I feel that this year is one of those years that they have invited me to have a resolution. And I think one of my resolutions for 2021, according to my kids, is that I should drive better driver. One of the reasons is because they gave me as a present this rear view mirror, which now this one has the uniqueness that you can actually see blind spots. So I'm going to recommend it to you. I get no commission by recommending this, okay? I just want to make sure that, but here's the thing. They gave it to me as a Christmas present, and I love it. I mean, it's just beautiful because you put it on your rearview mirror and allows you to see the blind spots on your vehicle. What I want you to do today, I want you to go to the book of Psalms, chapter 90. This is a tradition that we do as a church year after year. There are some things that we just do, and one of the things that we do is exactly Psalm 90. In Psalm 90, which is attributed to a brother by the name of Moses. This is Moses, the big Moses, the Moses of, the people of God, Israel, the nation, the founder of the nation. And tradition says that he writes this psalm that we're about to read at the end of his journey. If you know anything about Moses kind of divides his life into 3 different blocks. Every block is approximately a 40-year block. So the first 40 years is basically the prince of Egypt. He is in Egypt. He's born into this culture, raised into this culture of royalty. And at the age of 40, some of you know this, but he basically commits murder. And he flees from Egypt. And from age 40 to age 80, he's going to be in the wilderness, shepherding sheep, and basically as a fugitive. At age 80, he finds himself talking to basically a burning bush. And God calls him to go back to Egypt and deliver the people of God. That's age 80. From age 80 to age 120, another 40 years, he's going to do the whole, promised land, wandering in the wilderness for basically another 40 years. So we believe that Psalm 90 is written at the end of the journey. So if you can read with me Psalm 90, I think is Moses literally looking through a rear view mirror, reflecting over life, reflecting over 120 years of walking through this life. And in this case, what I think he's helping us to do as we reflect over the year 2020 and as we move into the year 2021, I think Psalm 90 is going to help us to see the blind spots. Blind spots. I don't know about you, but do you agree that we all have them? They're unavoidable. Like if you're sitting in this place and you don't think that you have a blind spot, that's a blind spot. Exactly. Not recognizing that we have them. So Psalm 90 is crucial for us, again, because this is Moses. I mean, this guy is extremely important for the formation of a nation, for the legacy of monotheism, the worship of one true God, the 10 Commandments. I mean, you name it. I mean, this guy is going to show up in the Transfiguration in the New Testament. I mean, this is Moses, and he's reflecting over God's faithfulness through basically the year. So if you have a Bible, go to Psalm 90 with me. And I'd like for you guys to simply read with me the following verses. Beginning on verse 1, he ironically begins with the personal name of God. And he uses the word Lord. Lord, you have been, and again, I just gave you the 3 blocks of Prince of Egypt. I gave you the second block of 40 years of wandering and shepherding, goats and sheep and everything, in the desert. And then the last 40 years as a nomad, just with no place and no identity. I mean, he's a fugitive. Now he's basically leading a bunch of people who are always complaining, always griping, and eventually, tragically, they're going to die in the wilderness. And he describes the Lord as a dwelling place. I don't know how you have navigated the year 2020, but it's been a displacement of a year, out of the ordinary. Just the 24th, I mean, if you are like us, Christmas Eve and even New Year's Eve coming up on Thursday is going to feel out of place. Many of us, we are still mourning the loss of loved ones. We are wondering how 2021 is going to look like. And again, Moses describes God as a dwelling place. And then he uses the word throughout generations. Typically in the Bible, this word implies 40 years. A generation is 40 years. That's how typically the Bible describes that. So Moses is, if he's at the end of his journey, that implies that he has been navigating this life and has reflected, or he's reflecting on the Lord as the one true God, as a very tangible, practical crystallization of who God is. So Moses has the ability to take a doctrine, a theological affirmation, and make it a tangible reality. I hope and I pray that as you navigate the year 2021 and as we reflect over the year 2020, I hope in God it's not simply a doctrine or a concept or a value. I hope and you have seen the Lord in a year that, again, for most of us feels out of place economically, racially, relationally. I mean, as a church, we have been out of place. Sunday school classes struggle to get them together. Worship services struggle. You see it from so many angles, and it has been a year of difficulty, which, again, the prayer, the hope, as you reflect and you get to see and you reflect over the past, as you look into the windshield of the future, I hope and you are this morning at the place that God, as important as He is as a doctrine, as important as He is as a cornerstone, as important as He is a foundation in your life, I hope that you are at the place in your life where He is tangibly manifested, tangibly reflected, again, crystallized, that you can literally confess that He has been your dwelling place. Verse 2. Before the mountains, watch this please, listen to the language. Before the mountains were born, you are the God who brought forth the whole world. So he's describing, once again, he's describing the personal God that has become the foundation, that has become the unshakable, the anchor, the cornerstone of life, in spite of how the generations turn, in spite of what has happened in our lives. He says, here's the beauty of this anchor. Here's the beauty of having God, not just as a doctrine, not just as a biblical principle, but as a reality, as a personal encounter with the God of the Bible, which Moses have seen it, right? Moses has encountered God at a personal level. He comes to the conclusion to say, I'm going to express, watch this please, I'm going to convey, I'm going to try to put the bigness of God within the limitation of human language. I'm going to say that again. I'm going to try to express the bigness of God in the context of so much limitations, and for us, limitations, pandemias. I mean, are you in love with those masks? I hate those things. I'm just glad that we have them to protect ourselves, right? But we're so limited. I mean, don't you miss the hugging and the shaking of hands? Don't you miss being with family the way that you wanted to be with family? I mean, we're so limited. And what he does, he takes the limitations of human language by using creation, as in the creation of the mountains, the formation of the whole world, and then he translates that into, once again, the limitations that we have is the stage that he uses to describe the bigness of God. In other words, what I'm trying to tell you is this. My prayer, and we hope and pray that the year 2020 and the limitations of year 2020 is not some sort of an indictment, some sort of a loophole, some sort of a motivation for you to feel or to perceive that the God that you have embraced, the God that you have known, is translated as a God who is limited. In other words, a lot of people look at the tragedies, the brokenness, the craziness, the suffering, and they wonder and say, where is God? If there was a God, this would have never happened. Moses is doing exactly the opposite. Without approving what's going on, because God does not approve death, God does not approve brokenness and craziness, but the brokenness, the limitations that you and I have to describe, the birth of a mountain, the creation of the world, those are ways to describe, because we cannot think beyond the created world. He's using that as a stage to describe the bigness of God. So what if I invited you, what if I asked you this morning to look at the brokenness of 2020, the challenges of 2021, because we know it's going to be challenging, 2021, what if the God of the Bible is the God who, I'm going to say that again, without approving what has happened, because a lot of what has happened is extremely painful, irreversible, and some businesses, some churches will not recover, will not survive. Tracking with me? Without approval. I'm not saying that God created or God rejoices on that, but He is the God who takes all of our brokenness, all of our sinfulness, all of our shame, all of our whatever, and He uses that to display that He is from everlasting to everlasting. And that is the beauty of this Hebrew poetry. That's the beauty of Moses reflecting. What's the point? Here's the point. If you're taking notes, here's the point. The point is that the promise was never safety. The promise was never, see, if anybody knows about unsaved life, it's got to be Moses. Would you agree? Come on, think about it. I mean, this brother, he went from being the prince of Egypt, being at the epicenter of culture and success. If Moses was using, social media, I mean, he had the most followers. He was destined to be in charge of the most powerful nation in the known world, thinking that was a safe place. Again, you know the story, but at the age 40, he goes from supremacy and influence and prominence into being at the lowest. I mean, a shepherd, I told you before, when you look at the Christmas story and when the angels speak to the shepherds and the shepherds go and worship Jesus, that's just inconceivable that shepherds will have access to the Son of God, because of what they represented in society. So Moses knew that being at the center of God's will is not the safest place to be in this life. I don't know if you agree with me on that one. Being at the center of God's will is not, in other words, all that I'm trying to tell you is this, that if you are at the place that you have known the Lord at a personal level, that His name, His character is tangibly manifested in your life and in my life through the year 2020. And we're at the place that we take, without approving, the brokenness, the craziness, the illness, the death, and the tragedy, and even the beauty of this world, that we take all of that to describe the bigness of God. What you get at the end is not a safe 2020. What you get at the end is not the promise that you will be immune in 2021. What you get at the end is that God becomes your refuge. In other words, I guess the freedom that we have is not that if you worship the God of the Bible, that you're going to be safe. The freedom that we have is that when you worship the God of the Bible, you're going to have the ability to stop the nonsensical thing of trusting yourself, but instead to look at the God of the Bible as the one who promised to walk with you through the valley of the shadow and death. This is the God that promised through the teaching of Jesus, I'm reflecting in the New Testament, that when you have wisdom, and we'll talk about wisdom, wisdom is when you build your house on the rock versus foolishness that builds a house in the sand. What's the point? Here's the point, that whether you have chosen to build your house in the year 2020 on the rock, whether you choose to build your house in 2021 on the rock, the promise is not that you're going to be spared or immune from the storm. See, in the story, when Jesus conveys this parable of the two houses, the two men building a house on the rock and on the sand, both get hit by the storm. Prosperity gospel will tell you that if you build the house on the rock, you will be exempt from the storm. That's not the case, and Moses knows that. So in this scenario, we believe that he is a refuge. Now, once you make God your refuge, instead of trying to make God your cosmic butler, once you understand that he is God, that he is eternal, that he is from everlasting to everlasting. Please listen to me for a second. Don't miss this. This is Moses. Once again, Moses looking through a rear view mirror, reflecting over the blind spots that he encountered as a 120-year-old man, now reflecting, now going through, again, memory lane and reflecting on, my 40 years in Egypt, my 40 years as a shepherd, and then my 40 years as a founder of a nation. He comes to the conclusion that the God of the Bible, who promised not necessarily safety, he promised refuge. He didn't promise the absence of struggles. He simply promised that he will walk with us through the valley of the shadow of death. What he describes, what he finds, Moses, is he understands who we are. Again, I've been so aggressive and so intentional this year, which I hope, and you agree with me on this, and even last night, talking to a friend of mine, that he was telling me he was going to preach today. I reminded him, and I've been driven this year by this principle. And please, again, listen. And if you want to consider something to take home today, I hope, or this year, most people, most Christians agree up to this point, as long as, since this is not guaranteed, and being at the center of God's will is not the safest place to be. That the promise is to find protection, to find a refuge in the storm. If that's the case, most of us, most Christians, what we're going to do, we're going to move to the next verse and the rest of the experience, the rest of this psalm, and we want to find a God that will tell us, just tell me what to do when I am in an unsafe, when economy is not working out. Tell me what to do when family life is not working. Tell me what to do when I'm going through grief. Tell me what to do when I'm going through anxiety. Tell me what to do when I'm going through. See, that's what we typically want to hear from God. And listen to the scriptures. This year, I've been trying to tell you, to convey to you, that the issue is not about us doing things. The issue is about what God has done. The gospel is not about what you do when you find yourself in the storm. The issue is not what you're called to do when you find yourself in loneliness or brokenness or betrayal. The issue is not what to do when we're in a pandemic. What we do is what Jesus did. The issue is what Jesus has done. Most of us, we agree theologically, doctrinally, we're in this place because we need to find ways on how to do life. And again, I give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm glad you want to do those things, but that's not the gospel. The gospel is not what the church does. The gospel is not what generations in the past have done. The gospel is not what the younger generation is eager to do. The gospel is what one single man in the history of humanity has done. His name is Jesus. That's the gospel. What you do, what I have done, what I want to do, what we should do, that's the result of the gospel. That's the domino effect when you are encountered with the majesty, with the glory, with the bigness of the God who is from everlasting to everlasting. This is why Moses, what he does, he describes who we are, not what we do. We'll get to what we do in just a second. But in Moses' case, let's just be honest. In Moses' case, because he is the founder of the nation, he is the recipient, the giver of the law, he knows what the people of God are supposed to do. I'll say that again. Moses knows, at age 120, he knows exactly what the people of God were supposed to do. The problem for the people of God in this time was not having access to knowing what to do. What was the problem? That they couldn't do it. Does that make sense? The problem was disbelief. The problem was disobedience. Would it be possible that that's exactly... See, look at what he says. You turn people back to dust. Again, he's reflecting, right? He saw, watch this. He saw an entire generation, is believed historically, 2.7 million people left Egypt to walk towards the promised land. And every single one of them, with the exception of Joshua and Caleb, are going to make it. But the rest are going to go back to dust. And the Bible says, return to dust, you... In other words, listen to the language. He is reflecting, he's looking to the rearview mirror, and he sees the bigness of God. He says that you are the God of the Bible. You are the one true God, that what you said at the beginning of the journey, no other gods before me, is true. That you will not share your throne, that there's no competition between you and anybody else. And since you are this God, you are the God, you are big, you are from everlasting to everlasting, the first thing that happens is not that your bigness becomes some sort of a room service that just transforms my circumstances. What the bigness of God does is that describes who we are. We are mortals. We are the ones that, we understand, once again, that 1,000 years in your side, because you are big, because you are the God of the Bible, it literally are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the in the night. What's the point? Here's the point. The point is that Moses have seen suffering. Moses have seen an entire generation go back to dust. Moses have seen the murder himself, murdering others. Moses is a reminder. I don't know if you ever thought about this, but Moses is a reminder in his generation. Moses is a reminder in his generation as a Hebrew boy back in Egypt. He is a reminder that if you were pregnant at the time that Moses' mama was pregnant, and your baby was born at the same time that Moses was born, I don't know if you remember the story, but there is a genocide with all those babies, remember? All those Hebrew babies are going to be killed when Moses is born. So if I'm the father of a son or a daughter that was born in Moses' time, and my baby died, was killed, but Moses lived, Moses, for the first 40 years, I believe he's a reminder of a genocide. All that I'm trying to tell you is that Moses knows suffering. And what I'm here to tell you is that for 2020, in the year 2021, it has to be the reminder that the main point for the Church of Jesus is not about what we're going to do for 2021. It's not about how we're going to restructure our families and our economy. All those things are legit, and we have to work towards doing and creating and changing and adapting and dreaming and all. I mean, yes, please listen to me. Yes, but that's had to be founded, built on the first two verses. On the bigness of God, that what he does, he describes who we are, and the bigness of God reminds us that 1,000 years, once again, listen to the language, we cannot, you and I cannot think beyond time. So he's using the language of time to remind us that although Moses, you have seen a lot. Although Moses, you don't know this, but you will not enter the promised land because he hasn't died, right? Moses, although these people that you have literally discipled, shepherd for 40 years, the first thing that they're going to do once they possess the land, they're going to disobey me. They're going to be like their parents, and they're going to go through a lot of suffering, a lot of self-inflicted suffering because they have forgotten that the God of the Bible, who is not limited to time, you are. That the God of the Bible that goes beyond time, that literally created time, that he has come on time, and he will eventually return according to his time, is not limited to how we perceive these things. It is no irony, and I don't know if you remember this back from, the summer. Well, it was half of the summer it was actually earlier than the summer that we went through 1 Peter. It is Peter on chapter 5, verse 3, I think, chapter 5, verse 5, that he uses this quote that remind the persecuted church, the church that has been dispersed, that one day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000. Here's the point. What Peter is reminding the church 2,000 years ago, that we're in a very intense, a lot of tension going on, and the church was moving to a genocide. The church was moving to the deepest of suffering. Peter is reminding that although you have no choice but to go through life through your senses, what you see, what you taste, what you hear, what you feel, nothing wrong with those things. That's who we are. We are finite individuals. But here's the beauty. Because of the object of your faith is God, it's not your faith. I'm glad that you believe. I'm glad that you're a part of the one true God, monotheism, Judaism, Christianity, whatever. All that is great, but the issue is not your faith. The issue is who and where are you placing your faith? In other words, the issue is not how these people are going to be faithful. The issue is how faithful God is. The issue is not how we have endured the year 2020. The issue is not how we have learned, and we're seasoned. We have learned the tactics and the views on how we're going to navigate 21. See, that's not the issue. And I'm glad we can, and I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that we are breathing. I'm glad that we don't have to be on a respirator. I'm glad that we have seen some deep and difficult scenarios, and now we are trying to rebuild. Nothing wrong with that. But the issue is the faithfulness of the God of the Bible. The question is, do we know that faithfulness? See, the question is, what's this? That you sweep people away in the sleep of death, and they are like the new grass of the morning. In other words, once again, Moses reflecting. Moses have seen the rebellion of the people. Moses have seen his own rebellion. Moses have seen that although God gave him 10 different plagues. Watch this. 10 different supernatural manifestations. The people of God kept on disbelieving God. Moses has seen how the people have been swept. I mean, I'm just going through memory lane with Moses, and I'm reflecting over that rear view mirror, looking at the blind spots. And he took the killing of the firstborns in Egypt for Pharaoh to say, let my people, and finally said, let's go. All that I'm saying, guys, is this, is that as we see people gone, it is the God of the Bible that will take, watch this, will take a brand new generation born in the wilderness, Moses, again, shepherding the brand new generation that will fulfill the promise of entering the land. In that context, he says, in the morning it springs up new, but by evening, it is dry and wither. All that he is describing is that the pain, the suffering, the 40 years, his very own suffering, and eventually the fact that he is not going to make it to the promised land was simply the justice of God. I don't know if somebody needs to hear this, but 2020 cannot continue to be the year that we look at all the suffering, all the brokenness, and we look at God and say, we didn't sign up for this. Why is this taking place? All that I'm saying is this. Please listen to me for a second. The God of the Bible has been so merciful to us, that we have made the mistake, this is Moses, again reflecting, we have made the mistake to assume that he owes us mercy, that he owes me grace. So the description that we just gave is not because of the behavior of the people that were rebellious in the wilderness, although they were. But what we just read about how people go back to dust, how we are mortals, how one day, 1,000 years is like a day or a watch of the night. All of that description is to remind us that at the end of the day, it is the bigness of God, the God who is just. And every single time that people, including his people, rebel, God has no choice. Someone has to pay for that rebellion. Does that make sense? In other words, all that I'm trying to tell you is that we're so driven by what we do. We're so driven by entitlement. We're so driven by this formulaic Christianity that I gave my life to Jesus when I was 14. Therefore, no one can judge me in salvation as a Baptist. Once saved, always. So I can basically do whatever I want. I can treat my body the way I want. I can basically, come on, listen. See, all this autonomy, we're coming to the place, Moses is coming to the place to remind ourselves that number one, grace and mercy, which is who God is. Watch this. Who Moses knows that although he exercises justice, and the moment that he told Moses, this generation is not going to enter the promised land, it wasn't because God was mean, was simply, vengeful, or he's trying to get revenge. What God is describing by not allowing that generation that Moses shepherded was simply the justice. God is giving the people what they deserve. But again, these people ourselves, we have grown so much and so accustomed to mercy and grace that not only that we feel that God owes us that, but then when a pandemic breaks through, when brokenness and craziness shows up, we are surprised. We are demanding it. We are upset. We question the veracity and the authenticity of the God of the Bible. And Moses comes to this place where he invites the people to say, we are consumed by your anger and terrified. In other words, we are so broken. We make the mistake, Moses. We make the mistake after 120 years of walking through this land and looking through the rearview mirror. My people, beginning from the first 40 years as a prince of Egypt, my second 40 years as a shepherd, and my last 40 years as the founder of the nation, I'm coming to the conclusion, to the understanding that if we are the people of God, we are the people of God not because of us. We are the people of God in spite of us. And again, we are so entitled, we were so enamored with our own selves that we created, we unleashed, we promoted the anger and the indignation of the God of the Bible because we have forsaken that the election, that the creation of a nation, the people who were slaves for how many years? 400 years in Egypt. The people who literally, they were polytheistic. The people who literally, they had no clue, no idea who God was. Moses shows up, reveals the gospel, reveals the character of God, reveals and introduces the concept of one true God, 10 commandments. This is the people that tragically takes all of this experience, all of this manifestation, the formation of a nation, thinking that they deserve better. And God looks at this, again, this entitlement, this mindset, the thing that they are Christians because God owes them. See, God describes and reveals his anger towards that because they have forgotten that the doctrine of election, choosing Abraham, to choose his family, to choose a nation, to choose the world, was simply the vehicle that was established on God's predetermined plan for salvation. And tragically, they disobeyed that. Now look at me for a second. I need to close with this. And I promise you, I'm fixing to close. This anger and this indignation, although it's tangible, and these people are going to know the anger of the Lord. Moses is going to witness some of the most radical, painful experiences. Moses is going to experience this by not being allowed into the promised land. Please look at me for a second. We don't have a choice, but we read this narrative through the fulfillment, which is the New Testament. And we read the Old Testament and the New Testament through the incarnation of the entire Bible, which is Jesus. And all that I'm trying to tell you is that when we celebrated Christmas a few hours, days ago, we conveniently forget that Christmas, what it represents is the beginning, is the accumulation of the anger and the indignation of God. That when Jesus was born from a virgin, that when this baby boy came into Bethlehem, when this baby boy showed up in this world, he showed up to suffer. He showed up to take our place. He showed up to really become the accumulation and the expression, the most grotesque and the most obscene expression of sin because of our rebellion. In other words, all that I'm trying to tell you is that we took Christmas and we romanticize it. We take Christmas and it's all about love and forgiveness and hope, and it is involved, but we forget that there is a Friday before there is a Sunday. We forget that literally in God's established, in God's predetermined plan, this whole experience is to understand that you have set our iniquities. Iniquities, you place them in Jesus before you. Our secret sins in the light of your presence. We understand that all of our days pass away under your wrath. We finish our years with a moan. I mean, this is something that is temporary. We're transients. And then here's one of the most well-known verses. Our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures. Yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass, and we fly away. See, all of this is the result of sin. And what we conveniently forget is that all of this is expressed, manifested, accumulated, placed, again, injected, transferred, imputed in one single person. The irony of the story is this one single person is the one single person that was innocent, that was perfect. His name is Jesus. And we forget this. We forget this, that again, in the transfiguration experience when Moses and Elijah showed up, this is the experience that all of this is true, but it's pointing not necessarily just to the punishment or to the reprimand to the people of God. Jesus is going to absorb all this. So this morning we simply confess that if only we knew the power of your anger, your wrath is as great as the fear that is your due. And in my mind thinking, this if, I will change it to sins. And the sins is not because we know the wrath and the power and the fear. You know why I believe it's the sins instead of, because if Jesus is one of us, he knew the fullness of the power. He knew because when Jesus literally is hanging on a cross, on a Roman cross, when Jesus cries out and says, why have you forsaken me? When Jesus eventually says, it is finished, the thing that we conveniently forget is that Jesus' punishment, Jesus' absorption of the wrath of God is literally because Jesus, please listen, don't miss this, Jesus became your guilt. Now, I don't know if that makes any sense. And I'm bringing this up because it's pretty obvious that we're going through a very broken generation. This is crazy. And some of us, we fear what's coming next year. I mean, we we know that this is difficult. We're going through the mourning of losing loved ones. Whatever we find ourselves, look at me for a second. Jesus himself volunteered to absorb. Jesus himself placed himself and literally, legally took our blame. Today, you are in this place because of the freedom that you have from the wrath of God, because God placed his wrath in Jesus. So my invitation is that this freedom in Jesus, this freedom from his power, this freedom from his wrath, I'm going to invite you that you do not translate this as an indictment, as a loophole, as some sort of a quick fix that you think that you will become immune from suffering. The freedom that you have in Jesus, because he has absorbed wrath, according to Peter in 1 Peter, is that now tragedy, difficulties, suffering, and even death must be the death, the tragedy, the difficulties that honor the God of the Bible. Peter is speaking to a generation. Moses is speaking to a generation that the problem was not the suffering. The problem is that it was self-inflicted suffering. So as you move, and if there is anything that you have learned, I have learned from 2020, looking into a rearview mirror, is that whatever happens in the year 2021, my understanding is that you are from everlasting to, come on, say it, from everlasting, that you are big, that you control the universe, that you are the God, you are who you said you are. Therefore, if I'm going to suffer, listen, if I'm going through the valley of the shadow of death, if 2021 is uncertain, and 2021 is difficult, and 2021 is going to bring some of the most difficult things in life, they got to be the result of walking in Christ's likeness. We cannot continue to be the generation that tragically, if there is any principle that we take from 2020, is that 80 to 90% of the suffering of this year has been self-inflicted. Do you agree with me? Oh, come on. The pandemic is a result of Genesis 3. It's a rebellion of man. Is man saying, no, you are not God. You are not from everlasting to everlasting. I am from everlasting. I rule my life. It's what I think. It's what I feel. It's how I was raised. It's my preconceived ideas. Is anybody follow me? This is a 120-year-old man reflecting over the goodness of God, that he invites us to simply become teachable. So I want you and I to pray right now for a 2021, not necessarily better, which nothing wrong with being better. And we have the freedom to pray for a better year. Nothing wrong with praying for healing and a vaccine that works and all that. But would it be possible that maybe the breakthrough is that we become the generation for the first time? That we become teachable? What's the opposite of teachable? Prideful? Self-indulge? Always looking at God and saying, how come? Why me? How can you do this to me? See, he says, teach us to number our days, that we may gain. In other words, without a teachable worldview, you're going to have in 2021 a heart of, what's the opposite of wisdom? Foolishness? Self-indulgence? My way or the highway? Does that make sense? See, I want you to hear Moses understand that the beauty of this teachability, the beauty of becoming the generation is that we simply, the teachability that Moses is describing, because again, we're reading Moses through the New Testament, we're reading Moses through the person of Jesus, is that this is not something that you achieve. This is not something that today you make it a resolution and say, I'm going to stop being a fool and I want to walk in wisdom. Teachability is not something that we do. Teachability is something that happens to us. Is the teachability of the Son of God transferred and imputed to us? Teachability is not the better version of this nation with a brand new president. Teachability is not that you survived COVID, went through the hospital, and now you're back on your feet. Teachability is not simply that you went through the valley of the shadow and death in your marriage, and now you're trying. No, listen to me. Teachability is understanding that we were the creators. We unleash the wrath of God. We deserve death. See, if you are in this place sitting, you are connecting right now, you're breathing, you're listening to the message, it's because of the grace of God. That's the only reason. There is no other explanation. And that should allow us to understand that the God who demanded justice has provided the teachable one. So you coming to know Christ is not so you can become a better version of yourself. You coming to know Christ, you praying, crying out to God, you following the example of Moses and looking through the rearview mirror, it's not simply these nonsensical things that all that you have to do is look introspectively. It's all you have to do is just simply, take a deep breath and listen to more podcasts and get a counseling, a session. See, all those things, I'm not against those things, but what you and I need, we need the teachable one. The teachable one is the justifier, is the God of the Bible who sends through a virgin, a baby boy. He walks in perfect obedience for 33 years. And in that obedience, he voluntarily moves into taking your place. And he literally satisfies the demands of the Father. So today, maybe for the first time, you have the ability to say, relent. How much longer, God? Because I understand and I want to embrace the teachable one. I don't want to become a better version of myself. I just want you to know, my Lord, that I'm just asking you, would you have compassion? Would you have mercy of us? Would you help me to take the mercy of God from a doctrine to a worldview? Would you help me understand that you owe me absolutely nothing? Would you help me to understand this morning that it is by grace and grace alone, that nothing can separate us from the love of God? Would you help us understand that this is about the trustworthiness of Jesus? It's not my ability to trust, because you and I know we're not trustworthy, right? You and I know there is no way you can base your experience of salvation on your ability to remain faithful to 2021. That's not the case. See, this is where Moses simply says, I want you guys to satisfy us in the morning. I want for you to help us understand that the satisfaction of our lives is not based on how better 2021 is going to be. It's going to be based on who you are. See, justice, wrath, vengeance, punishment, that's what God does. But who He is the God of unfailing love. This is the God that before the creation of the world, He pursued your heart. Before you took your very first breath and you came out of mama, He knew you by name. This is the God that whispers into your soul that He loves you, that He cares for you. This is the God that in spite of our circumstances, we pray in this very moment that we as the followers of Jesus, we as the church of Jesus, we stop treating God as the God who simply owes me, who should protect me, who should give me a better life. That's not God. He owes us absolutely nothing. It's the God that will satisfy our lives through the unfailing love, that we may sing for joy and be glad when the days are better, because 2021 is going to be better. No, it's in spite of how difficult this may be. It's that we are known by the generation of joy and gladness, that we are the generation that we pray and said, make us glad. See, I'm going to say that again. This is not something that we do. This is something that happens to us. For as many days as you have afflicted us, this is self-inflicted, obviously, as many years as we have seen trouble. This morning, as you pray with me, I want you to pray for two things. The first one has to do for the God who literally is available to you. And the declaration is simply this, that the things that you have done, this is why I'm keep on telling you, and I'm going to keep on telling you in 2022, and if I'm breathing on 2023 and you are listening to this message, you're going to hear exactly the same thing. The gospel is not what you do. The gospel is not what you have done, and the gospel is not what you wish and you dream to do. Many of you are doers, and you got plans and people to see and places to go. Power to you, blessings to you. The gospel is what Jesus has done. That's the gospel. That is translated into your doing. So your doing is important. My doing is important. But look at this. It is your deeds be shown to your servants. It is your splendor. In other words, what Moses is reminding himself at age 120, potentially breathing into the few days that he may have left. I don't know. We don't know where he's at. But all that I'm here to tell you is this, is that 2021 needs to be the year where we focus, where we understand not of our perseverance, but His preservation. Not because we are better, not because we figured this out, not because we know how to do, social this, all those things are legit, but it's the God who chose, once again, before the foundations of the world, to choose one man, to choose a family, to choose a nation, and through that nation there will be a seed, the seed of the woman. Through that nation, there will be this one single Jew, one single Jew that will come forth 2,000 years ago, and he will remind us of the unfailing love of the God who chooses to preserve. So I'm going to say this again. I want you to take your salvation very, very serious, but I want you to take God more serious than your salvation, implying that this is about the God who preserves. And because he has preserved us, and he literally guarantees, he promises these things, is that now we persevere. The perseverance of us as Christians is that we may find the favor of the Lord in each and every one of us. This is the promise for 2021, is the favor of the Lord on us, established. And I'm going to say this again. This favor is simply the result that his wrath was already placed in Jesus. So this is not because we got it, because we put our life together. This is in spite of our brokenness. It's because of Jesus. Now we get the favor of the Lord who establishes the work of our hands. God, will you take 2021, and as we are called to do, as we're called to continue, as we're called to love, as we're called to forgive, as we're called to serve, as we're called to gather, as we're called to be the church, as we're called to achieve, as we're called to study, as we're called to work, as we're called to do what we need to do, would you remind us today that this is the result of the favor of God, that this is the result of the God who takes our work, who takes our investment, who takes our calling, who takes our desires, who takes our lives and affirms in the very name of Jesus Christ.